Welcome into episode 350 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. A very impressive preseason win for the Bruins last night over the Flyers at TD Garden, 4-1. Preseason, yes, we all understand it, but it was encouraging because both teams pretty full NHL lineups. Bridget and Scott, I will say I'm a little bit hesitant to do any sort of recording because I just know that when we upload, there's going to be some breaking news that will become outdated.
Don't say that, but you're right. Some of our colleagues had to re-record their podcast because they had just recorded. Connor Ryan and Evan Marinofsky had just recorded, and then the Swayman's agent news came out. Which, by the way, we had already posted a few hours before that, but we have not commented on that yet. So we'll definitely get to that. But I mean, if a contract happens during this, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say if we want to get right into it, that's my opening shift. So we can start there. As Bridget alluded to, Monday night after our last episode went up, Louis Gross, Swayman's agent, put out a statement basically calling Cam Neely a liar, saying that $64 million had never been offered prior to Neely saying that at Monday's start of season press conference. And there's now been fallout and reporting since then that basically what it sounds like is maybe Neely fudged the numbers a little bit, but Bruins were very close to 64 million, even if they weren't exactly at 64 million, which sort of makes the statement from his agent come across as like, okay, I guess technically you have a point, but like this seems like a lot for, not that big of a difference between the actual offer and what Neely said. So, we'll get into this more, where we think things stand now. Gross said in the statement that he and Swayman were going to take a few days to figure out what they want to do next. So we can get into all of that. We do want to talk about the game a lot too, because, I think just for our own sanity, we can't do another full hour plus on just Swayman. So, but we do have to talk about that.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the number that wasn't that different. But I wonder if, this slightly higher number that they mentioned, 64 million during the press conference, maybe gets it done. Who knows? Because they weren't that far apart. But now, I think the reaction was just crazy. We'll get to it later. I have thoughts. My opening shift does have to do with the game and the return of Brad Marchand, who played in his first preseason game. So did Elias Lindholm. Both of them were dealing with recovery. Marchand from surgery, Elias Lindholm from a minor injury. So they were both back in the lineup. A few guys got their first game too. Charlie Coyle, he was not hurt, but he played his first preseason game. And then, of course, you see Marchand out on the ice for the first period, and then he doesn't come out for the second period. And so we talked to Coach Montgomery after the game, and he said it was actually just an illness. He missed practice the day before because of it, and that morning he was feeling okay, but then once he took to the ice, he realized it wasn't fully gone. So nothing to worry about in terms of people maybe thinking, oh, was it really an illness? Is it his shoulder acting up? Because he had, that was just one of his 3 off-season surgeries. It doesn't seem like it was a
not shoulder. It was the elbow. Elbow, hernia, and groin.
One of his 3 off-season injuries or surgeries. It doesn't seem like any of those were re-aggravated, so that's good news. But the bad news is we didn't really get a chance to see what that power play looks like yet, because it looked like they had one power play together with Lindholm and Marchand back out there. It wasn't really too much of a sample size to really gauge. So hopefully next preseason game we get to see the power play with all of them on it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the part about preseason that no fan enjoys, which is that holding your breath. Just hopefully nobody gets hurt, because there's been a lot of injuries throughout the NHL.
Macklin yesterday.
Yeah, Celebrini goes into the boards. Patrick Laine got leg checked. There's, Stutzel got like a headshot from
Ottawa
that
had 2 of them. Stützle and Brady Tkachuk both left that game.
And I think maybe Shabbat too as well. Yeah, so like it's just it's throughout the league. Like you got to tread lightly. There's a fine line between gearing up for the regular season and trying to stay healthy. Ironically enough, like the reason for preseason is so that people can get their reps, so that they can avoid those, muscle strains and tears and injuries and when the season starts. But in any event, yeah, Marchand not hurt, so that's good. Guys, what stood out to me all training camp, and it's just been reaffirmed last night against the Flyers, is that I believe we are all going to love the fourth line for the Bruins this year. And there could be a couple of different iterations of it, but in general, all the players bring a lot of the same thing, which is speed, size, physicality, and tenacity. And last night's rendition was Mark Kastelik centering Beecher and Cole Koepke. And Koepke, think has had a really strong camp. I know he scored a goal, I think, in the first preseason game. Wasn't very familiar with him. I don't think many people were, but as camp goes along, now it's making a lot more sense why he scored, because he just goes to the areas. He's got really good speed, and he's not afraid to just play assertive. Beecher and Kastelik, of course, we know what Beecher brings. His speed has been off the charts this preseason. Kastelik, we all know about, even though Ottawa fans would say he's not as tough as you guys think he is. Well, he's been in every single scrum, that, as Scott pointed out online. So now I thought the three of them were excellent last night, and I think that they can be real game changers for the Bruins throughout the course of a game in the regular season and the playoffs. Max Jones is a guy we haven't seen yet, but he's cut from the same cloth. And so no disrespect to Oscar Steen or Jacob Blauko, who's having a nice camp in Minnesota, or Patrick Bruin or Jesper Boquist, but like this rendition of the Bruins fourth line, I think is going to be a really strong element to their forward group this year.
Yeah, it's a real tone setter, and I think that's the role that they played so well Tuesday, is like that they were in on the forecheck, they were winning battles, they're physical. Kastelik is mixing it up after like almost every whistle, but not in like a stupid way where it's like, this guy's just gonna keep getting himself thrown in the penalty box. In like he's going hard to the net and someone takes him down, or he knocks someone down on his way there, and that leads to a scrum. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. Like it's not like he's like going out of his way to be like, all right, whistle blew, let me go see who I can slash. No, it's like crowds are being drawn because he's right at the front of the net when the play ends, because he's crashing, looking for a rebound, looking for a loose puck, or sticking up for a teammate. Like one of them, I think, who was it Hathaway? Someone landed a hit on McAvoy, and Castle kind of just came in and like, just a little bump, again, like nothing too stupid, but like, hey, like I'm here, like look out type of thing. So yeah, and you're right. And this is all without even seeing Max Jones, who I would say going into camp was probably the guy in that mix that I was most excited to see, and because of what he can bring in terms of speed and physicality. Like, the description of him was always like he plays with his hair on fire. So you haven't even seen that yet, and we already like what this fourth line is going to look like.
Yeah, Kastelik, it's kind of fun. It's almost comical that it is so consistent with him that every time he's on the ice for a whistle, it is just chaos after the fact. And like you said, he's not dirty. Will he get penalties from this a few times? Like, yes, he will. Like some of it, he's throwing people in headlocks. It's like, it depends on the night, depends on the refs. Sometimes they'll take two guys, or you know what I mean? Like they could call some penalties in the scrum, but it is really funny to watch. And it, not exactly, but kind of reminds me of the antics of Tkachuk. So that's something the Bruins did not have last season or the season before, where there's one guy out on the ice, every time he's out there, something's going to happen, the same way that Tkachuk's like that in Florida. So I think that when you watch the preseason, you see the Bruins looking better equipped for that matchup, and Kastelik's one of the main people that you see the tone and maybe the personality of the team changing, and Isadorov's another, but both of those guys for sure make it seem like the matchup with Florida it's not going to be as frustrating, maybe would be a good way to put it, because you have guys that can match it.
Yeah, to all those points, I think the way to describe Kastelik, at least in post whistle altercations, I would call it controlled chaos, because yeah, like stuff is happening, but it's to your point, Bridget, it's Matthew Tkachuk-esque, where it's like he's not doing anything that's breaking the rules. He's just going to the net mount and he's kind of standing there. And then, maybe he'll get some residual minors because people cross-check him and he'll respond, but he's not doing anything that's penalized. And a lot of times you're seeing Flyers players last night kind of like look to the refs, and it's like the refs are sitting there. He didn't do anything. He's just playing hard. So,
by the way, Garnet Hathaway,
yeah,
doesn't seem like he's friends with any of the Bruins anymore. It's like he forgot that they were teammates at one point. Like he's going after guys, and he's nuts.
Yeah, but that's his game too.
That
so
is.
he can't not play that way just because he's facing guys he used to be teammates.
Comes over, face washes Trent Frederick, and hits Charlie McAvoy. And
I'm willing to bet that outside of the boards, he's still thinks very highly of those players and vice versa. I think, yeah, it's just when the puck drops thing. But Max Jones, he was skating yesterday before the main group, and it's just worth noting, like, he looks really good. He's picking corners, and now granted, it's skill drills that he was partaking in with the extra guys that weren't playing last night. But his skating, his size, his shot, I think when he gets in the game action, like I said, he's just gonna fit right into what Koepke and Beecher and Kastelik and others are kind of already just doing this preseason. So I'm excited for it. I know we're somewhat short on time this podcast with Bridget, so I kind of want to shift to some of the D pairs last night, because I think the Bruins, you're right, Bridget, their size is evident. Everywhere you look up and down the lineup, the Bruins have players that are 6'2" plus that can play, but their team speed last night looked as good as it has been all preseason. Now, of course, that's because it was pretty much the entire NHL roster, which has not been the case. But I wonder if some of the D pairs contributed to that. McAvoy, Lindholm got put together, Zadorov and Peak, Carlo and Lohrei, and it looked like the transition game was strong all the way around.
Yeah, I really liked the way that the defense looked last night. I thought everyone was getting involved offensively. Taking shots from the point, getting them on net with a purpose, not just like flinging wristers into Sam Erson's crest, but taking hard shots, looking for tips, screens, moving deep into the offensive zone, like coming down the flanks. That's how Zadorov sets up the game's first goal with a nice pass to Justin Brazeau in front. But you saw from other guys, Hampus Lindholm crashing a bunch. Charlie McAvoy was deep in the offensive zone, which obviously, out of all of them, he is frequently. Lohrei, but like just on down the line, Andrew Peak had 8 shot attempts, led the team. Like he was shot ready. Montgomery mentioned that after the game. He said, he was really encouraged with the way the defenseman kept plays alive. And he said, most impressively, they were shot ready. And he said it's been a point of emphasis. He wants the defenseman ready to shoot and ready to shoot hard. And he highlighted that. He said, they, I forget, he said they were pounding it when they stepped into shots. So, yeah, like I think that's how they want to play. Last year, they did not get a lot of offense from the point. And part of that was they weren't as good of a possession team. So there weren't as many opportunities for defensemen to get involved, but they want to hold on to pucks more. They want to cycle more, and they want defensemen involved offensively. And you saw that Tuesday.
Yeah. And something that they didn't have last year, just because he wasn't on the team last year. When Elias Lindholm's on the ice, he's really good at redirecting. I've noticed so far, like he's pretty good at redirecting shots from the point. So you're throwing something from the point and you see him there in the slot or net front, he can get a piece of that. And there's other guys on the team that are good at it too. Charlie Coyle is somebody that's good at it. But I think Elias Lindholm probably is a step above the rest of the guys on the team in terms of redirecting shots. So if he's on the ice and you're a defenseman up at the blue line, you're looking for him too, because you don't have to fire it home perfectly. If it hits someone on the way through and goes in, that's, there you go. There's your assist. So that definitely adds to his ability to redirect pucks from the point, definitely adds to the reasons why they should be firing and shot ready from up there.
Absolutely. And another thing that I really enjoyed watching last night is there's a ton of versatility. Scott, I think you may have mentioned something online, or I think, where all these defensemen can play with each other, and it can be matchup dependent. If you want to throw Zadorov with McAvoy, great. You want to throw Lindholm with McAvoy, great. Lohrei with McAvoy, great. And all the other combinations, Carlo and Lindholm, Carlo and Lohrei, Peak and Zadorov, like it's Peak and Lohrei. There's so many different. I guess you wouldn't see guys with the same handedness, right? You could, but it's probably not ideal because they don't need it right now. So the versatility that this defense core can provide, depending on what style you're trying to play, depending on your opponent or whatever, then yeah, I just think it's one of the main reasons I love this D core so much.
Yeah, and Jim Montgomery has said he's gonna move pairings around a little bit. Like obviously they started camp really for the first week with Zadorov and McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, Lohrei, Peak. And now this week, for the last 3 or 4 days, they've gone with what we saw Tuesday night, where it was Lindholm, McAvoy, Lohrei, Carlo, Zadorov, Peak. But you're like you said, it's like they all look good. And Montgomery's even kind of said that. He's like, I really like how this looks, but I really liked how the other pairings looked too. And it's like, yeah, I think you're going to get a lot of that. And like you said, it's probably going to depend on, it could go night to night or even period to period. Like there's just going to be a lot of flexibility depending on what you want to get out of certain matchups or certain situations. But what they had last night looked pretty good. Like Zadorov and Peak, they were out there a lot in the third period protecting a lead, late in the game. So like you see that freed up Hampus Lindholm more to go on offense with McAvoy when they were out together. So, there's just a lot you can do.
And I want to bring up how they played on the penalty kill too, because they were pretty interchangeable back there. They were with different combinations throughout the PK. And I think that, the new personnel that they have, well, really just Zadorov, but the personnel that they have on defense on the penalty kill is really strong. I think that that's going to be one of their strong suits again. Even though, like we mentioned, Forbert's gone and that was kind of his specialty, I don't think you're losing much with the decor that they have right now. On the penalty kill, I think it's going to look very similar to how it did last year, just with Zadorov in there instead of Forbert.
Yeah, and Forbert's been injured so much the last couple of years off and on. Like he hasn't even been a mainstay for them because of injury. So I think Andrew Peak and Carlo and Lindholm and like all those guys, nobody's gonna mention the name Derek Forbert, I don't think, once throughout the year about how much we miss him, because it's, despite that being the strongest element to his game, he's far from the only guy in the NHL that can provide that. And that you're already seeing it, to your point, Bridget.
Yeah, and he's not the only guy that can block shots. So other people
Right.
that can step in lanes.
The one thing I always loved about Forbert blocking shots was he didn't really provide much offense. So it's gonna sound terrible, but like if somebody has to eat a couple shots, you'd rather it be him over like McAvoy or somebody like that. But whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I feel like that style of penalty killing isn't as prominent anymore. Anyway, it's like obviously you still have to block shots, and that's always going to be part of it. But Forbert was a little bit more of the older school. Like you're literally just gonna standing in a shooting lane, and now I think like penalty killings, it's more about closing quickly on guys, taking away space, and if someone is going to tee up a shot, hey, as long as the goalie had time to get square, like you don't need someone necessarily jumping in front of it. So I kind of felt for a while like he'll just jump in front of everything. It's valuable, but like I thought it was a little bit overrated at times, because Forbert would be injured and the Bruins would still have a good penalty kill, even if whoever was stepping in didn't block as many shots. So, I don't want to totally dismiss what he did because he was good at it, but there's other ways to kill penalties, and I think the Bruins are going to be just fine.
So we're going to switch over to the Swayman stuff right now. Before we do, just quickly, I would say Tyler Johnson probably had his best audition for the Bruins so far. Obviously, iced by that power play goal, the game-winning goal. And Brandon Bussi wasn't very challenged as far as shot total, but definitely his best performance of the preseason as well. So in the wake of the Jeremy Swayman saga, Bussi would presumably be their backup if Swayman remains unsigned, and it was encouraging to see that as well.
Yeah, he only faced 14 shots. Bruins dominated overall. Still would have liked to have seen better rebound control on the one goal he did give up, but made a couple big saves in the third period. Breakaway by Anthony Richard, took everything away, gave him nothing to shoot at. And then that was in a tie game. And then with the Bruins up 2-1 late in the third, Sean Couturier point-blank chance all alone in front, and he comes up with a big pad save. So, definitely something that he can get some positive momentum from, and really positive momentum that he needed because he had struggled his first two preseason outings.
Yeah, and basically what it looks like to me, and Bussi talked about this after the game too, just settling into the preseason, and it's been a while since he played a game, right? The same with everybody else. And it just, sometimes it takes goalies a little bit longer to get back into the swing of things. So he's getting, and obviously he was playing at the AHL level, and some of these guys he's facing now are a different caliber type of player, but the more he faces that caliber player, the more comfortable I think he feels, and maybe mentally as well as physically knows he can handle those shots a little bit better the further he goes into preseason. So it was definitely a good sign to see, especially since we know Swayman will not be back for the start of the regular season, just because even if he signed today, which hopefully, it doesn't break during our podcast recording or directly after, Swayman still wouldn't be ready for night one, which means, if there could be a few games, if not more than a few games, that Bussi would have to be the backup or take some of the workload.
Okay, so on the Swayman stuff, so when this all went down a few nights ago with Gross's statement, I kind of put a poll out on Twitter recapping the situation from the day and just gave fans the opportunity to say who's lying, Neely or Gross. And just over 1,000 votes, it was 80-20 that Gross was lying. As Scott alluded to earlier on, technically, it appears as though Gross may not have been lying, and Neely may have not been lying, but was maybe unintentionally rounding up or just, in the ballpark. Either way, it's, what's the phrase? Six doesn't half the other. It's not much of a difference.
Maybe it was a live offer.
Well, that's the thing. Whatever was on the table before, 64 million's on the table now. Like,
right.
You can't have Cam Neely say that in a press conference and then be like, actually, we're still at 62. Just to be like, no, you're at 64 now. So the Bruins offer is 8 years, $8 million a year. That is on the table. So
now let's see if it almost kind of calls Swayman's camp's bluff, because now it's like, if you're not good with 8x8, or again, there's people are commenting, there's different ways to get to 64. So we don't know exactly what it is, whatever, but call it 64 million.
Well,
that's what it is.
Evan Marinofsky said 64 years, 1 million a year.
People just talk about there's different ways to structure things, but at the end of the day, like, doesn't really matter to me.
The cap hit and the total payout's the same no matter what.
Right.
Like, yeah, you can get into the signing bonuses, and I guess that's not. It shouldn't be totally ignored because there's also a CBA situation coming up.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If there were a lockout, that affects it. But it sounds like for once we might actually avoid a lockout. All the reports out of the Board of Governors meeting, which is this week down in New York, are that there's actually a lot of optimism that there's going to be labor peace and they're going to get a deal done well ahead of time. So I guess we'll see.
I can't do another lockout.
So So I would say this. One thing that really annoyed me about the Gross statement is he's acting appalled about the Bruins' behavior, but at the end of the day, it's his client who went public first about wanting to reset the goalie market on a podcast that went public. And oh, by the way, the following day, Frank Saravalli is tweeting out or having a show about what the Bruins' actual offer was and what Swayman's actual ask is. I wonder where that information is coming from. So it's a dirty game.
Who's been leaking stuff to Spit and Chicklets?
Right. It's a dirty game. Let's not all act like, oh, how dare the Bruins, because you've been playing dirty this whole time. And it seems like the Bruins just wanted to get it out in the open. 64, and let's call your bluff. Let's see if you're really asking for 10 or not. Because at the end of the day, guys, if I'm the Bruins, I know a lot of people are saying, you know what? If you can't figure something out, just trade him. Get him out of here, trade him, bring something back. But in my opinion, if I'm the Bruins, I wouldn't even put a trade on I wouldn't even allow Swayman or his camp to think a trade is possible. If I'm the Bruins, I'm saying, no, we aren't letting you off the hook. You're either playing hockey for the Boston Bruins over the next couple of years, or you're not playing at all. Don't give the player a loophole to get out. That's my opinion.
Yeah, because that gives the leverage to him that there's another option. But we know that with Allmark, they played hardball a little bit with that too. So
yeah, I mean, the only way that it's going to be a trade is if, listen, Jeremy Swayman right now is free to talk to other teams. So if he wants a trade, there's been nothing public like regarding a trade request or anything. So we're only talking in hypotheticals here. Like, if he wanted a trade, the way to get it would be find a team that's going to make an offer sheet, because then that actually does force the Bruins' hand. Otherwise, like what would be the Bruins' incentive to trade him? Like, Razor made this point on Jones and Keefe on Tuesday that like this is a really hard time to try to execute a trade that big anyways. Like, everyone's cap situation and rosters are pretty much set. Everyone's trying to cut guys and get under the cap right now, not add a $9 million player. So it's not even a good time to do it. Like, trades like this happen over the summer or maybe at the trade deadline. But like, it would be like extremely rare for a player of that caliber to get traded in October. Like, it's just really hard to do it right now.
And also, you mentioned what the offer sheet value would be, and it is more than most people have. And because it has to be all your own draft picks that go back, it's more than most people have, and it's more than most people would be willing to give up. So the price for Swayman to get him through an offer sheet was how many first round picks, Scott? It was ridiculous. So, I think it would end up being 4 picks. Yeah. Do you think people are going to be able to do that? It's going to be really difficult. So offer sheet seems implausible too. And I do want to, before we keep going, I want to read the statement because we haven't read it in full yet.
Please. Yeah.
And so this is what was tweeted out, the statement from Louis Gross. It says, normally I do not release statements or discuss negotiations through the media. However, in this case, I feel I need to defend my client. At today's press conference, 64 million was referenced. This was the first time that number was discussed in our negotiations. Prior to the press conference, no offer was made reaching that level. We are extremely disappointed. This was not fair to Jeremy. We will take a few days to discuss where we go from here.
Well, it wasn't fair to the Bruins for their 6-year or 4-year offer at $6.2 million to get leaked out either. So let's take some looks in the mirror before we start throwing stones. But yeah, I also think, just wrapping up the offer sheet topic, if it's an offer sheet, I still think the Bruins would push come to shove, probably match an offer sheet at least worth 8.5 maybe.
Yeah, like that's about where I think the cutoff would be, like 8.5, maybe 9 or higher. I think they probably take the picks.
Yeah, sure. And at that point, I really wouldn't blame them. Now, I personally, guys, as tense as things got a few nights ago, I actually do believe that cooler heads will prevail, because right now what did Saravalli say? Swayman's camp was asking for like for like 8.2 or 3, and the Bruins were offering 7.8. And by the way,
he said 8.5 was Swayman's ask.
8.5. Okay. And by the way, like, is that potentially a crafted narrative? Like, were they actually asking for more at different points? So it's just a dirty negotiation right now. But at the end of the day, I think that cooler heads will prevail. The biggest thing I think that's in the way right now is just feelings, emotions, ego. And but honestly, that's what happens when things go public like this. And let's not forget which side went public first. And Mark Bertrand, who works at 98.5, mentioned this, and I'll plug them because it's a good thing that he said. This seems like arbitration in front of the public. This is what's playing out. It's like an arbitration hearing in front of everybody. It's ugly. It should never have gone to this point. But I do believe that cooler heads will prevail and that he will eventually sign, hopefully sooner than later. If he doesn't, I don't see the Bruins trading him. Again, like I said, if you're the Bruins, Jeremy, we're not trading you, bud. So you're either playing with us or you're not playing for 2 years, because we're not going to do this again next year.
Well, if we're the arbitrators, like if the whole public is the arbitrators, right? Like the judges of what the contract should be.
Well,
what do we think?
Ultimately,
what does he get?
They're the ones who have to decide.
Yeah. What should he get?
Like there is no one deciding for them this time. So they have to finish. They have to be big boys and finish this on their own. And if Frank Saravalli's report is accurate, and again, the Bruins are now at 8 a year because Cam Neely said so. And if Swayman's at 8.5, like, then that means both sides have moved a lot, because from everything I've heard, like, the Bruins now, like, I didn't get exact numbers like other people have thrown out, but Bruins started in the 6s, Swayman started in the 9s, is what I think. And that aligns with a lot of other reporting. So if they're at 8 and 8.5, then that's been quite a bit of movement from both sides. And that's just not that big of a gap. Like, you should be able to bridge that business-wise. The question, of course, now is, like, have feelings been hurt so much that Swayman says, screw it, I don't want to deal with this? Which that's really what it comes down to is what Jeremy Swayman wants to do, because Cam Neely can say what he wants and Swayman's agent can say what he wants, but, like, ultimately it's Jeremy Swayman's decision. And if he values being a Boston Bruin above all else, and he has said that he does, he said he wants to be here, Cam Neely said he told him to his face he wants to be a Bruin, then you can put all this ugliness to the side, sign your long-term big money extension, have you and your future family set for life, and go play with the teammates that you say you love being on the ice with and try to win a Stanley Cup. Or if you take this, or he needs to, the other decision he can make is that his feelings have been hurt so much and he takes this so personally that he is now willing to throw all that other stuff away. All the stuff about how much he loves his teammates and loves the city of Boston. He says, you know what? I don't think I'd even love that anymore. Like, you've hurt my feelings so much that I'm willing to throw it all in the trash.
Which, by the way, I have a hard time believing that would be the, like, after a few days, that would still be how he felt. Right. Because obviously he understands the business too. He agreed, like, at this point, he's in agreement to play this kind of negotiation. But I feel like, based on every time I've ever talked to the guy, he's not an overly emotional, overreactive kind of person.
Really?
Well, he makes comments to the media that says
I think he's a very emotional person.
I think that at the end of the day, he's reasonable. Do you guys not?
I think we'll find out. Honestly, Bridget, it's a good question. I think that's the $64 million question, right? Because yeah. I think that he was at the Jimmy Fund with Nesson talking about how
I talked to him there.
Yeah, and he
told me he was going to sign.
But he was talking to I'm blanking on the name of it. Is it Adam Pellerin? Is that his name?
Yeah.
He was talking to him, and he was saying what Scott was just saying, how he's very confident the deal's going to get done because he loves all the intangibles. But here's the thing. It's within his right to not sign. That's fine. But in return, the public is going to they're going to draw their own conclusions. And when you have a player like UC Saros, who has, similar numbers as Jeremy Swayman between the pipes, but has a game total and a resume that supersedes Swayman, exceeds what Swayman's done in the National Hockey League. And he's getting paid like 7.6 or something like that.
7.74.
Like compared to his comparables, Jeremy Swayman I'm glad he knows the cap is going up, but you can't, and that's why he's saying he's trying to but the Bruins can't, that's not something that they can control, because here in 2024 is the cap in 10 years. And that's why he's making the comment, I want to reset the goalie market. And in my opinion, Jeremy, that's not your responsibility to do. Like your responsibility is, what's that?
So it shouldn't be the priority. If this priority is that what you've said, which is that you want to stay, then setting the goalie market shouldn't be. And also think it's something in Boston that people don't like to hear because of the team friendly deals that some of the other stars have taken.
Or how about the owner of the Boston Bruins, who's like, high up with the NHL owners, hearing his own players say that. Unfortunately for Swayman, because of his RFA status and his lack of games played in the NHL, he's not in a position to reset the goalie market. That's not a reasonable thing to pursue right now for him.
Right. And I've made this point before, but $8 million a year does, like, in a lot of ways, reset the market for an RFA goalie. It might not reset it for all goalies in general, but only one RFA goalie has ever been paid more than that on a contract. And that was Andrei Vasilevsky right after he won the Vezina Trophy. So, again, as I've said before, sorry, you're not in the same situation Andrei Vasilevsky was at that time. You're in a similar situation as Igor Shesterkin when he signed as an RFA and got, let me check, under $6 million a year. You're in a similar situation as when UC Saros signed as an RFA right after taking over the net from Pekka Rinne, and he got, let me check, $5 million a year. Or John Gibson, who actually did have more experience and had been a number one who played 60 plus games the year before and got $6.2 million a year as an RFA.
You didn't say, let me check again. Come on. You're being sassy and you didn't say it that time.
So, like, those were all signed like 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that set a market of like 5 to 6.2 million. So if you're getting 8, you have actually pushed that number up.
Right.
Like, again, unless you think you deserve Vasilevsky money, in which case I just fundamentally disagree.
And this is common knowledge strictly because of Jeremy Swayman. He went on a public podcast and said these were his intentions. So we hear him say that he's trying to reset the goalie market. Him and his agent are playing hardball. We've all heard the Bruins are willing to go to 64, whether or not Neely slipped and mixed up the numbers a little bit. Like, if to your point, Scott, $8 million is resetting the market for a restricted free agent, and it's also making him the highest paid goalie in league history. Like, it's paint. There's a reason why, if this gets ugly, continues to be ugly, I'm sorry, it's just gonna be. He's not gonna win a lot of fans in Boston. If he ends up playing here again,
if he ends up like shooting his way out of town eventually, with this whole situation by like sitting out and then going somewhere else after, he becomes among like the Johnny Damons of to the Red Sox fan base, like the traitors, right? Like the guys who decided to leave when they said they loved it here. And you go down in a completely different place in Boston sports history at that point.
It would be if Jeremy Swayman's last game for the Bruins was an incredible playoff run and it all went that south in an offseason, he ended up going somewhere else. It would be the biggest heel turn since Hulk Hogan turned heel at 1996 Bash of the Beach. I don't know if that's a reference, Bridget, you understand, or Scott understand.
No clue.
I get it for sure.
That would be the biggest heel turn since Bash of the Beach 96. Hogan going from red and yellow to Hollywood Hogan and getting trashed running the ring and everything. So that would be a bad look. I hope it doesn't get to that point.
And I mean, I guess if Swayman ends up somewhere else, he probably doesn't much care other than, the once or twice a year he'd come back as a visitor. But yeah, I mean, that would be how he would be remembered, because we now know what the Bruins offer is. And I think most people are in agreement that it's a pretty reasonable, fair offer. Whereas like Torrey Krug left, but I don't think Bruins fans have any hard feelings, because we all found out after that the Bruins never even really made a serious offer. They clearly were just going to go in a different direction and weren't going to re-sign him. So like, no one blames Torrey Krug for going to St. Louis in free agency, because you understand that situation. Whereas with this, it's like, we know there's been an honest effort to keep him.
Right. And it just sucks because everybody loves Jeremy Swayman, or loved. He might have some impartial fans right now, but after last year, he was a major fan favorite. And in a goalie market, that's tough to win fans over because of Tim Thomas's excellence. And Tuukka Rask went a decade plus with a love-hate relationship with fans. And it's just disappointing. This is how things have played out. Now, I think if he signs tomorrow, it's going to be water under the bridge for everybody, fans, ownership, Swayman, everybody. But I just think we'll see how it plays out. We have literally no time. I'll just ask you guys quickly.
Well, there was a very brief we want Swayman chant in the third period last night at TD Garden. So, I mean, there's certainly still, I'm surprised this is the first time we heard it, especially after the dramatic statement.
It kind of stayed in like one section. Like
it was near us, but it was loud enough to hear. It was like one or two sections behind the away goal. But it did happen.
Bridget and Scott, one word answer. Bridget first. Do the Bruins and Swayman reach a contract agreement in the next couple of weeks?
I was gonna say yes, but I don't know when. So
okay,
so yes, but I'm not sure what time.
Okay, Scott.
I'll say yes, and yes within that couple week time period.
As will I. I'm gonna say within the next week, actually. So we'll see. Call me optimistic. Everybody, thank you for listening. Bridget, good luck with your meetings. Scott, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.